Our Torah portion starts in Genesis, or the title is Berashit, and it just means in beginning. And it's the first 5 chapters plus 8 more into the 6th chapter, and it is just full of so many studies that I could have picked from. So I prayed about it, and as always, he tells me start in the beginning, you know, so we're going to start at the very beginning. But just as an overview, chapter 1 is the history of creation. And by the way, while I'm going through this, if you'll open up your version of Scripture to go along with it when I start, because it'll make it a lot easier to understand it. And I need visual aid all the time. But chapter 1 is the history of creation, days 1 through 6. Chapter 2, Shabbat is instituted, a blessed day. And then there's another brief accounting of creation. And in verse 4, Yahweh, Elohim, breathes the breath of life into Adam. Then Yahweh, Elohim, plants a garden in the east. And life in the garden, and the woman is made from Adam. That's all in chapter 2. Chapter 3, things go bad. The serpent enters the garden. He entered in one form and left in yet another. That's the fall of mankind and the separation between God and man. And then in chapter 4, children are born outside the garden, Cain and Abel. And of course we know that murder happened at Cain's hand and killed his brother, Abel. And then we see the birth of Seth. And in verse 26 in chapter 4, if you're there, there's a verse that's often misunderstood. And it says, then men began to call upon the name of Yahweh. If you understand that word begin, it means to wound, dissolve, or profane. And to call means to encounter accidentally or with hostility. So when you read that verse, it has a whole different meaning. That we think, you know, you call upon the name of Yahweh. This was profaning the name of Yahweh. And you'll see that sin was a very slippery slope. Then in chapter 5, we have the generations from Adam to Noah. And chapter 6, wickedness abounds, or the sons of God, and the daughters of men produce giants, or the Nephilim. And Yahweh makes a decision to destroy mankind, beast, creeping things, birds. We have creation at that chapter 1, and in chapter 6, we see the decision for destruction. But Noah finds grace in the eyes of Yahweh. And those generations from Adam to Noah, and very quickly, I can get you a copy of this if you want it, but Adam means mankind, Seth means is appointed to, Enos means feeble, frail, mortality, Cain means a fixed dwelling place, Maha'el means God who is praised, Jared means comes down, descend, Enoch means to instruct, train up. Methuselah, a man sent forth. Lamech, to be beaten, smitten, and tortured. And Noah means bring rest, a quiet place. So when you read the definitions of all these names of these generations into one sentence, it comes out, mankind is appointed to feeble, frail mortality, a fixed dwelling place. God who is praised comes down to instruct as a man sent forth to be beaten, smitten, and tortured, bringing in rest and quiet peace. So we see the gospel in just the names of the first 10 generations. Okay? Now, the lesson. We're going to start in Genesis 1 and 2. And I'm just going to read it. I go from the New King James. Your versions may have different reading. Okay? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So doing a word search, you'll find that it's not quite what we might think it means. So let's start with created. It's bara, and it means to create or to cut down. So it's got kind of a mixed meaning in here. Then look at the word was, and that's haya, and it means to exist, to become, or came to pass. And then without form is the word tohu, and it means to lie waste, desolation, a worthless thing, in vain, confusion, empty place, without form, and wilderness. And then void is bohu, empty, undistinguishable, ruin, emptiness. And then darkness is koshek. It means darkness, misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, wickedness, dark, withholding light. And then deep means it's tehum, and it's an abyss, subterranean waters from home, H-O-O-M is how it's pronounced, to make an uproar, greatly agitated, destruction, to move and to make noise. So we see these words and the definitions of them are so much more than what we might just understand just from the surface value of the text. So let's look at the text again with these definitions. So in the beginning, Elohim created or cut down or recreated, to cut down and recreate the heavens and the earth. The earth became desolation, a worthless thing, confusion, empty place, and a wilderness. And darkness, misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, and wickedness was on the face of the greatly agitated abyss, the subterranean waters. So that gives you a different understanding just from spend a little time in your Strong's dictionary or whatever reference you have. But for the remainder of this Torah portion, I'd like to focus on the cure for all this upheaval. Because it didn't stop in chapter 1. It's alive and well today. Things left unchecked will always revert back to chaos. Always. Sin left unchecked will always revert back to darkness. We don't have to teach a child to be a little brat. We don't have to water weeds. Okay? I don't have to walk away and my closet just all of a sudden becomes chaos. You know, I have to work at keeping it in order. And for the ladies, you understand what I'm talking about. But we have to be active about it. And sin, if we leave it unchecked, we will slide back into darkness. It's just one sin at a time. We make one mistake, and we very quickly will continue to make others if we don't check that one mistake. And in Jeremiah 4:23, it says, I beheld the earth, and indeed it was without form and void, and the heavens, they had no light. And Isaiah 45:18, for thus says Yahweh, who created the heavens, who is God, who formed the earth and made it, who has established it, who did not create it in vain, who without form to be inhabited. So we see a confirmation of this understanding in those two different verses. And I'm going to try to go quickly for the rest of it, so if I go too fast, I'm sorry, I don't know how to get through it any other way. In verses 3 through 5, then God said, light be. He didn't say, let there be light. He said, light be. He spoke it out. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. So that's where we get, day begins at sunset. Okay? And it goes to sunset. In these few verses, God renews a state of chaos, bringing order into disorder. He brings emptiness into fullness. So let's look at light, the word or. To be luminous, glorious, to set on fire, to shine, to illuminate, lightning, happiness, clear and bright. So we see a vast, a lot of words to define light, but nowhere does it say the sun and the stars or this light that he spoke out. This is a different light. So God separates the light from darkness. This separation, this expression is a principal theme throughout the entire Bible. God is always calling us to be separate. He's always separating. You'll find it in the book of Revelation, separating the sheep from the goats. There's always separation. And in Psalms 33:6, it says, by the word of Yahweh were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. And we just read verses 3 through 5 in Genesis 1, and the word light appears 5 times. So how many books are there in the Torah? 5, okay? In Psalms 119, 130, it says, the entrance of your word gives light. It gives understanding to the simple. Proverbs 6:23. For the commandment is a lamp and the law is a light, and reproofs and instruction are the way of life. So we see that Torah is life. Is light. John 1 through 3. Now we should all know this one. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. So we see, who is the Word? We know, right? Yeshua, right? He was there at the very beginning. John 3:19 through 21. And this is a condemnation, that light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than the light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light, and does not come into the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. But he who does the truth, that's interesting, does, it's an active thing, comes to the light, that his deeds may be seen clearly, that they have been done in God. So Isaiah, let's look at Isaiah 42:6 through 7. I, Yahweh, have called you into righteousness, and will hold your hand. I will keep you and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the Gentiles, to open blind eyes, to bring out prisoners from the prison, those who sit in darkness from the prison house. This darkness is prison. It's bondage. It's not someplace we want to play with. We are to be called out of that. And then in John 8:12, during the Feast of Tabernacles, which we just celebrated, when Yeshua spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. Then John 9:4 through 5, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And then we see that Yeshua is the light of the world. In Matthew 5:14 through 16, you are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, so they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So we see that God is light, Torah is light, Yeshua is light, and we should be light. The darkness is always trying to draw us back in, but we must stay grounded in our source. Okay, God, the Torah, and Yeshua, that's our source. That's our source of light. Isaiah 9:2, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. So we see that we were in that deep darkness, in that shadow of death, until Yeshua came. And then we're called out of that darkness. And you'll see this same verse repeated in Matthew 4:16. In fact, most of the New Testament, you'll find a lot of exact quoting or allusion to verses in the Old Testament. In 1 Peter 2:9, it says, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. The same way Yahweh called out the darkness and the light separated, he called that light out of the darkness that it was. So we have to remember that we have to be an active participant in this. We have to accept it. And in Ephesians 5:8, you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. And these are things that we have to be constantly on guard about. I was just talking to Mr. Joseph over here and about crucifying the flesh. It's not fun, but it's to be something you have to do regularly. You have to crucify that darkness that's in you. You have to turn from it. It's not something you want to play around with or to invite into your life, because it will overtake you the same way weeds will chew up an entire beautiful garden and nothing flat. And then I'm going to stop in Acts 26:18. And I've used this scripture many times and for many years, praying for my children and other people in my life. And I personalized it, okay? But my prayer is that their eyes be open, that they turn from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to you, my Father, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among those who are sanctified by faith in Yeshua. So I do pray that for each one of your family members that you pray that for them. It's an amazing thing to pray back the Father's word to him. And I thank you for your time. Shabbat shalom.